Sembra di vedere un film di fantascienza.
It's like something out of science fiction. The Martians have landed and destroyed everything. Sawn off tubes, rusty metal. It looks like a picture by Böcklin, the melancholy artist who painted sad, abandoned islands. He could have painted something like this.
Dipingeva isole tristi abbandonate, potrebbe aver dipinto anche queste cose.
Successivo è 0,25, 0,25 di rivestimento, 7,62 per 4,96, pompata, 5 rotoli, 0,28 di spessore, 0,50 di rivestimento, 7,12 per 5.
Conigliano rappresentava un esperimento nuovo.
Conigliano was experimental, a new chance not just for Italian industry, but for the whole city of Genoa. I was looking for someone who could give a shape to the programs and advertising.
Quello che impostava questi programmi, anche tipo degli avvisi pubblicitari.
Quando Eugenio Carmi,
When the young artist Eugenio Carmi was made art director, people were still not really aware of how important a designer or an artist could be to a factory.
Che avesse per una fabbrica, per un'azienda, la presenza di un designer, di un artista.
Io ho introdotto
At Conigliano and later for Italsider, I introduced abstraction in all the company's internal communication. The entire corporate graphics became geometrical, all in the same style.
tutta con lo stesso stile.
Entrare in fabbrica e assistere per esempio alle colate.
Going round the plant, seeing the molten steel being poured, the colossal machinery, the swarm of workers in overalls with strange helmets, goggles. It was a scene that, especially if you allow for the naivety of the 60s, was pretty striking. There was nothing like the communication of today, constant and continuous.
Non c'era un tipo di comunicazione come oggi esiste, continuo, costante.
Beh, è chiaro, uno stabilimento siderurgico.
Of course, a big steel works, for someone who's never seen what goes on there, it's hard to imagine. But if you see the liquid steel being poured, the blast furnace in action, it's like a scene in hell, with flames, fire and sparks, steel flowing everywhere. It's no picnic in the park.
Nelle fabbriche del dopoguerra,
In factories, after the war, men came face to face with the future we're living in now. An extended factory, limitless in space and time. A society that consumes pre-programmed goods and dreams. But even when the denial of human nature is at its darkest, there's always someone looking for a way out. And in the nooks and crannies of the system, they can create islands of intelligence and salvation, showing that the human plant can take root, even in hell.
Schumpeter era un ministro socialista.
Josef Schumpeter was an Austrian minister who escaped at the Anschluss and later taught at Harvard. He thought that big industry should not only produce goods, but civilization too.
Produrre solo dei beni, ma deve produrre anche civiltà. Demmo particolare attenzione.
We paid a great deal of attention to cultural policy. We published a magazine, the Conigliano, later Italsider Review. We set up a factory club with great facilities. We ran both a theatre and a cinema with quality films.
Attrezzato, in cui davamo spettacoli sia teatrali sia cinematografici con dei buoni film.
Per immaginare cos'è la creatività,
To realize what creativity is, you have to think of the cavemen who decided to paint bison instead of going out and killing them.
lo dipingevano.
Giungle di tubi.
Jungles of tubes, chimneys piercing the sky, enigmatic cathedrals holding humans in thrall, hostages to profit. What is the connection between this harsh landscape and the curiosity of art? You can always find a breaking point, a gap in the system, to allow new meaning for things. Carmi at the Italsider Steelworks in Genoa is the story of a manufacturer of images, that was his own phrase, who impacted with a booming industrial culture. The extraordinary thing is that he succeeded in establishing his artistic vision without compromising on its utopian charge, but still keeping his work well inside the real world.
Quegli anni si è potuto constatare
It was a period when you could see how important it was to have an aesthetic element following and observing big industry.
un elemento estetico che ne seguisse il corso.
In quegli anni, ma quegli anni anche a Roma e anche a Milano.
At that time in Genoa, and in Rome and Milan too, painters had huge influence. They were always being called on to produce works, objects, graphic compositions, all for industry.
Per l'industria.
Il primo impatto di Carmi con la Cornigliano.
The first impact of Carmi at Cornigliano was to go in the offices and see the grey walls lined with folders, ledgers, files, all grey. The first thing he did was bring colour into the factory, the offices. He tried to create a uniform style for all the materials in daily use in the offices, the folders, the filing cabinets.
Di tutti i materiali che vengono usati comunemente negli uffici, quindi i classificatori, le cartelle, quelle per contenere i documenti, eccetera.
Noi volevamo dare qualcosa.
We wanted to give something different, something to stimulate another part of the mind.
Parte della mente.
Molti uffici volevano.
A lot of officers wanted Carmi folders in their own special colours, even though obviously it couldn't be done. But the fact that staff wanted folders of a particular colour shows just how much they liked them.
A Cornigliano.
Here in Cornigliano, Carmi used the covers of the corporate magazine as a virtual art gallery, inviting artists from all over the world. Here he invented books like The Colours of Iron by Umberto Eco and the engineer Gino Papuli, with photographs of steel like abstract pictures. He invited Kurt Blum here to shoot the documentary Man, Steel, Fire, which won at the Venice Film Festival. Here, in places ruled by a serial, anonymous aesthetic, Carmi introduced rigour in full colour. Colour opens up windows of meaning, makes choices possible. It makes life more complex and, in the end, more beautiful.
Pensavamo di fare, come era un'idea del Bauhaus,
We thought, in the same way as the Bauhaus did, that we could mass produce objects of value, objects that would help build a more logical, rational society.
Razionale in funzione.
Anni 50.
The 1950s. With wartime privations over, Italy was getting back into the stride of a consumer society. Cornigliano, later Italsider, was a giant of state industry, built with American money. State-of-the-art technology, 2.5 million square meters, 70 kilometers of rail links, 20 kilometers of metalled roads. The plant was built on a strip of coastland reclaimed from the sea. Lupo Osti was determined to carry out a cutting-edge industrial scheme without worrying too much about conservative objections. He wanted a modern organizational setup and industrial relations, giving carte blanche to people with initiative and daring.
Eugenio Carmi, Popi Fedeli, sottoscritto.
Eugenio Carmi, Popi Fedeli, myself. We were an odd group, crazy almost. We thought and reasoned in a way that was, though I say it myself, ahead of the times.
Molto anticipatrice, almeno consentitemi di dirlo, rispetto a quello che era il livello del tempo.
Un gruppo che...
A group working enthusiastically for the future of a steelworks which was apparently supposed to last 100 years, maybe more. And our job was to create an image for the plant.
Noi eravamo impegnati a creare l'immagine di questa fabbrica.
È venuto a parlarmi di un'industria.
He came to talk about an industrial concern. At that time it was Italsider, and a huge range of activities. The Italsider magazine, edited by Popi Fedeli, was a very lively cultural review.
Estrema vivacità. I fotografi che noi usavamo erano...
We picked out the top photographers of the moment. One was Bloom, another was Mulas, who took fantastic pictures. Then there was Patelani, Monti, and many others. They did a lot of great work.
Erano moltissimi i fotografi che hanno fatto delle bellissime cose.
E ebbi la fortuna di
I was lucky enough to find myself working with people like Valentino Orsini, the Taviani brothers. The list goes on. Piero Onelli, Massimo Mida, Giovanni Vento, Glauco Casadio. A whole group of young directors who, after working with us, went on to make remarkable films.
Era rivoluzionario che una ditta...
It was revolutionary for a steelworks to be commissioning work from artists.
Si mettesse a far lavorare gli artisti.
La mia grandissima innovazione.
My big innovation was not to do what everyone else would have done, give space to my own work only, and instead to call in artists from various parts of the world to work on the Italsider image.
Di varie parti del mondo a collaborare all'immagine dell'Italsider.
Era bellissimo perché
it was wonderful because Carmi gave us work, well paid too, which was a positive aspect. It was stimulating work. We could say what we thought. There was never any censorship.
C'era un lavoro stimolante perché potevamo dire quello che pensavamo, nessuno ci ha mai censurati.
Erano anni in cui
we were sowing seeds in those years. Many seeds. Perhaps because of how oppressed we'd been before. There was, I dare say, an enormous effort to break free of academia.
Di tutte le situazioni di tipo accademico.
La mostra chiamata...
The exhibition, Sculptures in the City in Spoleto, was an idea by Giovanni Carandente. The sculptors came from the UK, the USA, France, Italy, all using the plant workshops, assisted by the workers and using machinery that no sculptor could ever have in their own workshop.
Che nessuno scultore avrebbe mai avuto nel suo studio.
Noi abbiamo inondato.
With 12 artists involved, we could flood all the most interesting spaces and sites in Spoleto.
Tutti gli spalti e i luoghi più interessanti di Spoleto.
Vennero questi artisti e noi li mandammo in stabilimenti.
We sent the artists onto the factory floor, where they worked alongside the regular workforce. It was all highly positive. I'm convinced it was an extremely useful experience for both sides, artists and workers.
Molto utile ad ambedue, sia agli artisti che agli operai che vi furono coinvolti.
La mia conoscenza in materia.
I had a very limited knowledge back then. I was completely green. Without their technical skills, I could never have made this work, which, in any case, is still the only iron sculpture I've ever produced.
Abbiamo avuto dei problemi che erano dovuti.
We had some problems with the aesthetics of where the sculptures were to be sited. For example, Carandente, who ran the exhibition for the Spoleto Festival, actually had us move some traffic lights because they didn't fit in with the sculptures.
La mia scultura, quella che io ho fatto con gli operai a Cornigliano.
My sculpture, the one I made with the Cornigliano foundry workers, was dropped by a crane and smashed 2 days before it was due to be shipped. The workers, the same ones who are now retired in Genoa, were so keen to reconstruct it that they worked night and day for 48 hours. Using photographs, the sculpture was rebuilt and sent to Spoleto on time.
La scultura fu ricostruita e fu mandata regolarmente a Spoleto.
Non ci fu solo Spoleto.
There were other projects besides Spoleto. The same year, 1962, Carmi commissioned paintings by Italian artists for the Italsider stand at the exhibition of Italian industrial achievements in Moscow. Instead of steel coils, they showed large-scale abstract and figurative works of art, which were a challenge to orthodox socialist realism. The image of an industry became the image of a country. When Carmi brought in the architect Konrad Wachsmann, suggested by Giulio Carlo Argan, he stayed in Genoa for 3 years to design the new Italsider building and restructure the port, going way beyond communication. He was venturing into town planning and urban development, looking to reshape the city's relationship with the sea. But the scheme failed to find favor in an inward-looking city, and Wachsmann returned to America a disappointed man.
Si capisce che un'idea funziona quando
You know an idea works when there's nothing irritating around it.
Forse anche
Carmi was comfortable with technology, maybe because he studied chemistry at university. At Italsider, he eagerly absorbed everything which was driving society. In the things he did, inside and outside the factory, he cherished the idea of a future in which men and women would learn to be free.
Una serie di opere di Carmi che forse non sono
One set of works by Carmi, which are perhaps not among his best known, are the health and safety signs he came up with. I think he had a brilliant idea. In order to warn people of possible risks, he didn't refer to the object, because if you trip over something or it falls on you, then of course you don't see it, so there's no point in knowing what it is or what it's like. Instead, he targeted the parts of the body that could be hit by the object. I remember the sign said, "Your head," or "Your hands," so that anyone seeing these fairly abstract compositions, a helmet on a round head, something of the sort, could immediately know how to protect themselves.
vedeva un elmo su una testa tonda, eccetera, una cosa del genere, sapeva immediatamente come cercare di difendersi.
Carmi was very clever, partly because he got the best out of us.
Delle volte andava a corrottarmi.
Sometimes you used to go to the scrapyard, pick out the bits you were interested in, bring them into the foundry, and we would put them together. I welded them, and something living, beautiful would emerge.
Qualcosa di bello.
Io sto pensando
I'm thinking of Carmi as a schizophrenic character from Raphael's School of Athens, the one in which Aristotle stretches his hand downwards and Plato points upward with his finger. On the one hand, Carmi was immersing himself in pre-painterly, maybe even then extra-painterly media. On the other, he was rising into the Platonic Empyrean to paint his geometrical forms. I don't see a contradiction there. If you were to open him up and see what goes on inside, what chemical compositions form, you'd find the two aspects are closely related.
Chimica si forma e si vedrebbe che le due cose hanno uno stretto rapporto.
Beh, Carmi ha dentro di sé
Well, Carmi has an engine of incredible power inside him. I don't think I ever met another person with his capacity for motivation, for persevering.
Questa capacità di motivazione, eccetera, che c'ha lui, e questa perseveranza.
Italsider era una di quelle aziende che aveva creato un suo mondo.
Italsider was a company that had created its own highly active cultural world. Another such company was Olivetti. Today, I believe there are no such companies left. For one thing, because industry itself has gone. We're in a total service economy. For another, because industry is run not by industrialists, but by bankers. Bankers buy an arms factory one day and sell it the next to buy two that make scarves. So they can never create an environment with an ongoing world of its own.
C'è una specie di maledizione divina.
There is a kind of divine curse on the human race, namely that the human race expresses itself well when things are basically pretty tough, when things are going badly. Back then, the war had plunged Italy into the state we all know, so there was a unanimous desire to solve problems and work our way out. When the situation began to improve significantly, that was the start of splinter groups, enmity, jealousy, fear, with people entrenched in the positions they'd won.
Quando la situazione cominciò decisamente a migliorare, allora ricominciarono tutte le varie suddivisioni e inimicizie, gelosie, timori, difesa delle proprie posizioni particolari.
Il clima era...
The atmosphere was closed. It was no longer right. It was over. Over with us. Finished. Basta. For an artist, a painter, having to make an object or do a magazine cover wasn't an insult. Of course it was a way of making money, but it was also a way of intervening in society and trying to change it. Changing society is no easy task, as we realized later.
Tutta la storia.
History doesn't proceed by leaps and bounds. It follows a sawtooth graph. You have to accept that reality. Exactly. We follow a saw-toothed graph, and it would be all too easy to say we're in a down cycle today, one in which utopia would have no place. But by its very nature, utopia is always topical. You just need the human spark. You just have to blow on the embers to fan the flames of the future.
Oggi poi ci rendiamo conto che mentre la fabbrica...
We realize today that while the factories have practically disappeared, in Genoa as in Milan and Turin, the graphics of those years are still alive and effective today. The work that Carmi produced as a sideline for Italsider is still representative of the graphics and even of the art of the period.
Ancora oggi sono documenti interessanti per la grafica di allora e anche per quello che era l'arte di allora.
Il fatto che Genova non avesse risposto o...
The fact that there had been no response from Genoa or from Italy as a whole, seeing as how the management was in Rome, that what we were trying to do had not really struck home. It's not surprising. We were projected towards the future. They were stuck in the past.
E loro erano fermi al passato.